and you bring in Tyson Walker. Tyson Walker, point guard from Northeastern, had a great year. 18 points a game, almost 19 points a game, 5 assists, super quick, 2.5 steals, defensive player of the year in the CAA. They tied with James Madison there at 8-2 for the conference. I would think, there are some turnovers that can occur with him, and he's high with the turnovers, but the defensive presence that he brings, and he is a point guard here, Chris, I would think that's kind of the focal point as we move into 2022.
Yeah, and I think there's no surprise that Tom Izzo went after a point guard who has such a good defensive pedigree. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's when you talk about, he loves to use the phrase, just, the head of the snake. You cut off the head of the snake, the body will go crazy. And when you've got a guy, that holds true for the defensive end. That everything on their defensive side is orchestrated and created on the ball at the point. And it's going to be interesting to see where Walker is in that system. We talked about Hauser struggling to adapt. I think Walker, just simply because Izzo's being a former point guard and having, there's a school of thought that he is a very good guard coach, and that's ultimately what he's always been. So, he's going to bring him along quickly. And, and they've got more guys, I think, that are going to be able to handle the ball. I think A.J. Hogarth came along at points last year. He was rushed. I mean, I think Hogarth, to me, he had a pretty good freshman year by all accounts, because he wasn't supposed to even be in that chair, running the point and starting games. And they ended up having to start him at times. And I thought, when he gets his play under control a little bit and isn't trying to do everything, I think he's going to be a very good complementary player. And then they bring in, Max Christie and Jaden Akins. So you got more guys than Pierre Brooks, all guys that can handle the ball. Most of those guys are wings, but Akins is a flexible enough guy that he could play the 1 or the 2. So you're going to have some guys that can run the offense for Tom Izzo. And it's going to be interesting to see how those guys blend together, because I think it's also maybe going to be maybe one of his more versatile teams, particularly on the perimeter.
Max Christie, the big recruit here, Chris, 5 stars, number 1 in Illinois, 19 nationally, top 20 guy, 6'6", 200-pound shooting guard. I mean, I see him and Tyson Walker in the backcourt. We're starting to shape up a little bit. Recruiting class, second best in the Big Ten, right behind Michigan. Nationally, they're top 10. So this is, Michigan State always gets their guys, and they fit in. But I think there's a pretty strong group coming in.
It is. And I think the key is going to be how they blend with the guys that are there, because I think that the upside still hasn't been reached with guys like Gabe Brown and Malik Hall. I think those two guys in particular, and Marcus Bingham as well. I mean, those are guys that still have high ceilings that they can reach. And when you look at the complementary players they brought in, I think a guy like Christie is the knockdown shooter that they've wanted for a while, and maybe have been missing since maybe Gary Harris. I mean, at the 2, Langford had his moments like that where he was that guy, but he was so injured and out of the lineup in the final couple years that, it wasn't necessarily the same player as he was developing into his sophomore year. And I think Christie, from all accounts over at Breslin Center, is just a dead-eye shooter. And maybe it could end up being one of the best that Izzo's had. And with that size, I think that definitely is going to be, he's a star in the making. And Brooks and Akins has, when we talk about Tyson Walker being that traditional point guard, Akins is more of that combo kind of guard that can be a lead guard who attacks, and he's got some springs. He might be, with his ability to get to and finish at the rim, he might be one of the more electric guys with the ball in his hands that Izzo's had. So that it was a very good guard class, and Brooks is a bull in a china shop. I think that's going to be, watching him. And here's the other thing. They've got 2 open scholarships. So between now and the beginning of the season, I don't know if Tom Izzo will use those scholarships. If there ends up being a last-minute transfer situation, that could be a factor. But he also has two football players who he's bringing in to kind of complement the roster, and Malik Carr, who transferred in from Purdue, and Keon Coleman, a kid from Louisiana, who was a dynamic scorer there. So those guys are freakish athletes that can play at this level. So it's not like he's just bringing in walk-ons. He's bringing in guys that, from the football team that can play if, depending on how long it's going to take them, if they get there in January, I don't know how much they're going to be able to give, but they're certainly going to be interesting players to watch because they've got that physical ability to, at minimum, elevate practices and maybe give them a couple minutes off the bench.